Hey everyone, and welcome back. We're doing something a little different today. We're taking a deep dive into a real person's budget. Don't worry, we've changed all the names and kept everything anonymous, but this is going to be good, I promise. You're going to see it's relatable and maybe even a little eye-opening. It's like we're financial detectives, kind of.
It is amazing how much we can learn just by digging into a real world budget like this. I think it really hits home in a way that just talking about generic financial advice doesn't.
Right. It's one thing to say, like, budget your money. Okay, sure.
Yeah.
But how does that actually work in real life?
Yeah.
So let me introduce you to Roger. Roger is 42. He lives in Denver, loves hanging out with his dog, and loves geeking out with friends over Dungeons and Dragons. And a good beer on the weekend. I mean, who doesn't?
Sounds like a lot of people we know trying to navigate life in a city like Denver, which, as we know, isn't exactly famous for being easy on the wallet.
You're telling me
Eh,
the rent here makes my eyes water, and I'm just a humble podcast host. Speaking of rent, Rogers is pretty average for Denver, $1,400 a month, but he's splitting that with a roommate. Then there's the car payment, $275. And have you ever tried getting around Denver without a car?
Yeah, it's definitely a consideration in a lot of places these days. I mean, when you look at the national average, owning a car is almost unavoidable outside of a few urban areas, and it really becomes less about, luxury and more about just plain necessity.
Oh, absolutely. Anyway, after rent in the car, we've got the usual suspects. Groceries, those are hitting for about $400 a month. Utilities around $150. And then his furry friend needs about $125 for food and, the occasional squeaky toy. All pretty standard so far, right? But here's where we start to see how individual choices really come into play, that entertainment budget.
Yes, this is where things get really interesting because we get to peek into how a person's priorities are reflected in their spending.
For sure. Now, Roger's spending around $200 a month on things like those epic D&D nights, nights out with friends, those weekend beers we talked about. And you know what? Good for him. Everyone deserves to have a little fun. But, and you knew there was a but coming, right?
Always a but. It's all about finding that balance, enjoying life, but also planning for the future.
Exactly. When we add up all of Roger's expenses, he's only got about $380 left over each month. Now, that might sound okay to some people, but in a city like Denver, where unexpected expenses can pop up faster than you can say Rocky Mountains, that's not a lot of wiggle room. And let's not forget about saving for the future.
And that's the big question here, isn't it? Does Roger's current budget actually line up with what he wants to be able to achieve financially down the road? That's what we're going to start digging into next.
So we got Roger's financial snapshot, right? His income, his expenses, his love of a good, was it role-playing game?
Laughs.
And he's walking that tightrope, living comfortably, but not really a lot of breathing room, right?
And this is where the deep dive gets even more interesting because in the source material, we actually got some of Roger's aspirations. So it's not just about making the numbers work, it's about aligning those numbers with what he wants to be doing.
Okay, let's unpack that then. What does Roger want to achieve? He trying to finally become the dungeon master of this friend group.
Yeah.
Laughs.
Well, maybe that's on there, but financially speaking, the source material mentioned a couple of things. First, he would love to pay his car off faster. Imagine that. No more car payments.
Oh man, I remember when I paid off my first car, it was such a good feeling, such a weight off your shoulders. But how do you get from just enough left over to actually hitting those goals?
It might be simpler than he thinks. The source material highlighted a couple of areas for potential adjustment that can have a snowball effect over time, that whole power of compounding thing.
Right.
Even an extra $50 a month consistently put towards that car loan could shave off months of payments, maybe even a whole year.
Wait, seriously, $50 a month makes that much of a difference?
Absolutely. Think about it. That's $600 a year working for him, chipping away at that principal and saving on interest payments too. And that's one small tweak.
Okay, so where does that magic $50 come from?
Well, remember those grocery bills that we talked about? $400 a month for a single guy? Even with a furry friend. I mean, I'm not saying he needs to be living on, ramen noodles, but seems like there might be some wiggle room in there.
So what can he do? Spill the beans. I'm sure our listeners are like, yes, give us some advice. Well, the source material actually mentioned meal planning. Imagine Roger designates one night a week to cook a big batch of something. Lentil soup, veggie frittata, maybe even a big pot of chili that reminds him of home.
Okay.
Right, something hearty. That can drastically reduce those impulse takeout orders.
Yeah, it's so easy to fall into the convenience trap when you're busy.
For sure.
A little bit of planning. And hey, maybe instead of going to the pub every week, he has his D&D crew over and they do a potluck night.
There you go.
Gonna find that balance, right? Fun and financial responsibility. Exactly. And speaking of aligning spending with values, the source material honed in on Roger's love for his dog. And it's not just about pet food and toys, it's about having that peace of mind knowing you can handle whatever life throws your way, especially those unexpected vet bills.
Oh, tell me about it. My dog once ate an entire sock.
Oh no,
Emergency surgery is not cheap.
it is not. And that is where, that emergency fund comes in. The source strongly recommended that Roger actually prioritize building one, specifically tailored to Denver's cost of living.
Yeah.
Having that safety net in place, that's not just good financial advice. That's like peace of mind for Roger and his little buddy.
An emergency fund. For Denver, yeah, that makes sense. So where does Roger go from there? He's got the grocery bills tackled, maybe swapped a pub night for a home-cooked meal, got that safety net building. What's next in this grand adventure to financial freedom?
Well, you know how we were talking about how generic advice wasn't really going to cut it for Roger? This is where that comes back in a big way.
So he needs to ditch the one-size-fits-all approach and get himself a custom-tailored financial plan.
Bingo. Like those quests in his D&D games, right?
Yeah.
You don't go after the dragon with a generic strategy.
Okay, I like where this is going. So no more cookie-cutter solutions. Time for a plan as unique as Roger is.
Right. And the source material actually gave us a place to start. They suggested that Roger could look into something called index funds or maybe a target date retirement account.
Hold on. Some of our listeners are, just starting out, maybe like Roger. Can you break those down for us?
Absolutely. So an index fund, it's basically a way to invest in the stock market, but instead of picking individual stocks, it's like a pre-built portfolio that just tracks a certain market index, makes it much simpler.
So you're diversifying your savings without having to, be some kind of Wall Street hotshot.
Exactly. And then a target date retirement account is even more straightforward. You just pick a fund that's got a target date that's close to when you think you're going to retire, and it automatically adjusts your investments to get more conservative the closer you get to that date.
So Roger could be taking control of his future without needing a fancy degree in economics. Love it.
That's the power of just taking those first steps, building that solid foundation with the emergency fund, and then exploring options that actually match up with what he wants to do. Maybe he wants to pay that car off even faster. Maybe he wants to get a down payment for a place of his own.
Maybe he wants to upgrade his D&D game with some cool new miniatures. Who knows?
Hey, no judgment there.
But
The point is, Roger's in the driver's seat. He's making his money work for him.
it's funny. We started out just looking at this one guy's budget, but it feels like we found something much bigger.
What's that?
It's that first step,
Yeah.
asking questions, checking out different options, and realizing that building a strong financial future doesn't mean you can't have any fun. It's about making sure your spending matches what's important to you.
Could have said it better myself.
So, Roger, if you're out there listening, we're rooting for you. And to everyone else, hey, remember, your financial journey is yours to create. Start small, be consistent, and never underestimate the power of a little planning and a whole lot of determination. Until next time, keep diving deep.